The woman and her 8-year-old son fled the Charlton Street house as choking smoke billowed through its rooms and halls.
Smoke was gusting out the front door and the flames were quite severe around the back.
Neighbours using garden hoses fought the flames, unsure of whether the family had escaped. Paul Harold was later treated for smoke inhalation.
I don't know if I would have had the courage to go in, to tell you the truth. It would have been an on-the-minute decision.
As far as we knew, there was no one, but we conducted a search as soon as we had the fire under control to make sure of it.
Firefighters wearing breathing apparatus probed the blackened interior before giving the all clear. The woman and her son were cared for by neighbours. Most of their belongings had been ruined. Firefighters suspect the blaze started where a small electrical appliance, possibly a hairdryer, was left on. Andrew Lobb, NBN News. Robert Bailey is one oyster farmer who's had just about enough of the ongoing spat over which types of oysters should be grown and sold in Port Stephens. So he and his family have put their efforts behind an innovative marina business. People are talking and boats are walking thanks to a new locally designed and produced mobile slip.
It is different. I'm coming to terms with the word unique on it. I haven't seen anything like it in the world.
It's made of galvanised steel with 8 remote-controlled hydraulic rams. The unit can take vessels up to 30 tonnes and 17 metres in length, including yachts, trawlers and multi-hulls. It's fine-tuned to fit most configurations without putting undue stress on the hulls. Once out of the water, craft are transferred to hard stands in the yard. Mr Bailey claims there are considerable savings for larger boats. Federal, state and local government representatives attended the launch, looking ahead to further developments on the site. There are plans to expand into dry storage to accommodate hundreds of pleasure craft, using the marina as a base to explore the waterways.
There's a lot that the people can do using this as a launching area.
"75-year-old Lorna Codrington of Delungra, 78-year-old Annie Leader, also of Delungra, and 28-year-old Ross Andrew McIntyre of Inverell were all killed in the head-on crash. Another man is in Inverell Hospital in a stable condition with head and chest injuries. Police say one of the vehicles tried to overtake a truck in low visibility, hitting the other car travelling in the opposite direction.
They went to the break 10-all, the close score surprising many of Curry's fans. The intensity between the teams was obvious, with tempers often flaring. With just seconds to go until full time, the scores were locked at 14-all and nobody was leaving the ground. A penalty kick from Carl Press sealed the win for the Cheetahs. Over at Harker Oval, West were always in control. However, South showed flashes of brilliance, enough to put a scare in the premiers, the Rosellas comfortable winners. At Charlestown, Toronto basically ran a one-horse race against the Butcher Boys. Scorpions hooker Peter Beck had a blinder, racking up his 100th point for the year. Charlestown, though, were thinking about next year.
You don't have to have a pot belly this size to want to lose weight. Almost 100 men with various waist measurements are attending the first Gutbuster courses being run by the Hunters Health Service. 44-year-old Bill Beattie says it's uncomfortable carrying the extra inches.
Everything you do to tie your shoelaces, every time you buy clothes, it's hard to buy clothes.
When a woman puts on weight, it usually goes to her hips and to thighs. When a man puts it on, it goes straight to his stomach. Unlike women, the type of fat men store around their stomachs is dangerous to their health.
The problem is huge. 1 in 2 men in Australia have a pot belly which puts them at risk. Now we know that abdominal obesity is linked to heart disease, which is the #1 killer in Australia.
Greg Mowbray says it's surprisingly easy to get rid of that gut. The course encourages men to be more active and eat differently, not necessarily less. Fatty fast foods are out, high fibre is in.
They've got to be prepared to trade it off. And what that means is if they have 1 middy of beer, they've got to be prepared to do a 10-minute walk. And they can have up to 4 beers a day, do a 40-minute walk, and you've neutralised it.
There's still time to join up. More courses begin next week. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Around 9:45 this morning, a small van travelling west on the Guida Highway swerved into the path of an oncoming semi-trailer in an attempt to avoid a kangaroo. Grafton police say both drivers had tried to avoid the collision which followed.
The small van then struck the bank, speared back across the road onto its correct side, but in the interim the semi-trailer, in an attempt to miss the van, had moved over the incorrect side of the road, and as a result the collision occurred.
2 people in the van were killed instantly, their bodies incinerated when the vehicle burst into flames after impact. The driver of the semi-trailer, aged in his late 40s, was taken to the Grafton Hospital with minor face and back injuries. The highway was blocked until about an hour ago. Emergency crews from Grafton and Lismore spent all day removing the wreckage and the truck's load of grain, which covered both lanes. Sergeant Hampson says the Lismore Accident Investigation Squad is continuing inquiries into the incident.
While the Board of Directors has been busy fighting for the club's financial survival, tonight it's turning its attention to the team's future on the field. 3 people have been shortlisted for the job as coach, following the controversy. Those being considered are Peter Dewhurst, coach of Cessnock soccer team, Jim Foley, the coach of Highfields Azuri, and Ken Kaiser, who's Director of Coaching with the Northern New South Wales Soccer Federation. Ken Kaiser says he would like to take on the job, but he comes as a package with the Northern Soccer Federation. Kaiser would remain as Director of Coaching and take on the job as coach with the Federation's backing.
We can bring in an immediate structure of development coaches, medical staff, all that sort of thing that is going to get the team up and running as quick as possible.
However, with all the controversy surrounding the team, how would Kaiser keep the players if he were coach?
They need to be convinced that we want to do very, very well next year to keep them here.
A final decision is expected to be made tonight, with many pundits backing Kaiser for the job. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Coal exports represent a $6 billion a year industry for Australia. More than a third of that figure comes from New South Wales. Last year, 53 million tonnes were sold overseas. Of the state's 4 mining areas, the Northern District is the largest. For the past 2 weeks, it's played host to an international delegation representing 12 of our biggest coal customers from Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent.
This is probably the most high-powered delegation we have had here.
Director of Newcastle University's Institute of Coal Research says there are many rewards to the United Nations-sponsored visit.
There will be relationships formed and hopefully cemented that will lead to bigger things in the future and also to more cooperative research.
also better understanding and a good start for us to conduct the business later on.
Tomorrow, the delegation will tour an underground mine, a coal treatment plant and a power station. Melinda Smith.
Falcons captain Terry Dozier will provide the strike power for the All-Stars, a team made up of players from the NBL, whether they are Australian or American imports. The All-Stars will play the Australian national side, the Boomers. Dozier says the game will give everyone the opportunity to show off their flair and style.
We're going to be superstars for a day, you know, that all the attention is going to be on us, and it's just going to be nice being celebrities for a day, and hopefully we can put on a good show and everybody come away feeling like they got their money's worth.
Teammate Everett Stevens will make the trip south to defend his slam dunk title. Today he rehearsed a few moves but didn't want to give too much away. There's $1,000 riding on the flashiest dunk.
Sergeant Glenn McGuinness and Corporal Andrew Barter of the 173rd Surveillance Squadron near Brisbane are in Newcastle on a mission. They want to go where no soldier has gone before to obtain a certificate for advanced life support.
It's a first for Newcastle. In the past there's been other Army personnel trained in Sydney, but it's a first for Newcastle and we're very pleased with it.
The pair has spent 4 weeks in Sydney for lectures from doctors and professors and 2 weeks at Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital observing theatre operations. The soldiers are now on the hardest part of their mission, a month-long assignment on the road with Newcastle paramedics.
There's been a broader range of injuries. We're not used to a lot of cardiac problems, etc., because military members tend to be a little bit fitter and a bit healthier. But it's been a real eye-opener.
Once they've completed the course, which is one level higher than a general ambulance officer but lower than a paramedic, they'll return to their Queensland regiment. Their newfound skills will be used on civilian disasters as well as during Army operations.
And realise that advanced life support and paramedic skills would be vital within the Defence Force and specifically in our role in support to aviation units throughout Australia.
Righto, one on each tripod, on the count of 3 we'll lift.
Yeah. So that's why I was trying to lower the muzzle.
Lake Macquarie residents go to the polls in just over a week to elect a new mayor. In the only forum before the election, the 9 candidates were given 4 minutes at Toronto last night to say why they should be the city's leader. Councillor Greg Piper targeted the environment and unemployment as the main problems confronting the city, while 21-year-old Richard Hill gave the audience a history lesson of sorts. Newcomers Stephen Katsigas and Peter Craig struck a popular note with their comments about politics.
Political parties should not be involved in local government.
She shook her head. I believed about us and not about himself.
Council, and he will control the caucus, so nothing will change.
When the election occurred that elected this council, in my view, remained today. They are roads, they are drainage, they are the environment, they are communication or the lack of it.
Voting is compulsory at the July 24th poll.
The rehabilitation of Kooragang aims to give the community a greater use of the area. The cheque handed to Landcare Australia will initiate studies of wildlife in the salt marsh and mangrove habitats on the western end of the island. New South Wales Fisheries says the long-term plan is to maintain the most important habitats and even replicate them to generate greater numbers of native species.
We anticipate that a nursery function will be fulfilled here, and that the fish that would grow and survive on the island would leave the island via the creeks that are here, move out into the river, and then become available to fishermen of both types.
Landcare Australia says the rehabilitation of the nation's wetlands is a priority.
The wetlands in Australia have deteriorated probably to the extent of up to 70% over the last 100 or so years, thanks to the various works that have been done along the coastline in various forms.
Mr Fairbanks says city farms, educational facilities and reserves are planned for the island. While landcare programs are more common in rural areas, he says there is scope for Newcastle residents to make this their own.
There's a research angle that certain scientists will do, but they'll need help from ordinary people in even pulling out rusty car bodies. I saw quite a few this morning in the creeks around here.
This grant will fund the program for 3 years and the PWCS may make additional contributions. Jennifer Ingall, NBN News.
Organised by Newcastle and Lake Macquarie Councils and Buttercup Bakeries, Project Earth has challenged the environmental minds of thousands of Hunter Primary School students. Nearly 30 schools took part. Children were encouraged to think more about the environment and how to care for it. The judges had a tough time choosing the winners in the categories of land care, energy and conservation. Encouragement awards went to 5 schools. Spears Point and Rathmines Public Schools took out third places and $500. Second places and $750 were awarded to Hamilton North, Hamilton and Plattsburgh Primary Schools. The big winners of $1,000 were Jesmond Public, St Joseph's Primary and Kurri Kurri Public Schools. The Knight's Tony Butterfield coordinated the project and hopes it's the first of many.
I think the schools have decided that the environment is a major issue. The Education Department has decided that that's a major part of the curriculum. And with the local companies like Buttercup becoming involved and putting a few dollars behind it, that can assist the schools in buying some of the equipment that they need.
Some prize money will be used to help other environmental projects. Melinda Smith, NBN News.
The loss last week to Brisbane hurt the Knights. It spelt the end of the race for them and gave their fans nothing to cheer about. Knights forward Tony Butterfield found the perfect way to bounce out of the blues. On Wednesday, his wife gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Isaac.
They all want him to be a footballer, but not me. I think he's going to be a scientist or something along that line.
Tony says although he would love to stay at home this weekend, he realises he has a job to do.
Well, there's a great deal of pride to salvage. There's still 7 games to go. It's a substantial part of the season, and we need to get a good off-season prepared.
Fellow forward David Boyd is leaving the Knights to play in England at the end of the year, but he too says he doesn't want to leave the season unfinished.
If we can come away with 5 from the next 7, we certainly will finish the season with a bang, so that is the goal at this point in time. But sure, it's disappointing, but you just can't put the boots in the cupboard for the next 7 weeks. You've still got to get out there and aim up.
We'll have a full match report of the game against East in NBN News on Monday night. Curry and West's games have always had an extra edge of aggression and the crowds love to see it. This weekend, Curry officials expect the sports ground. West captain coach Neil Baker knows what sort of an effect that can have on a visiting team, and he's devised a set of plans to get around it.
I think the crowd support will be very important to Curry, and mate, I said to my guys to try and play on the other side of the field as much as possible.
Both captains want a nice dry track to let their speedsters do the work.
I think it'll be a very open game. West like to play an open game, and so do Curry. We've got a few strike weapons out wide, and we're looking to use them.
Only 2 games tomorrow. The home teams are in blue. On Sunday, the rest of the round will be finished off with plenty of eyes on the result of the Toronto-Waratah game.
Taking centre stage at Newcastle's Entertainment Centre were 14 high schools from throughout the Hunter and Central Coast. They dazzled and danced before a panel of 9 judges and an audience of thousands. Judges say this year's standard resulted in a close finish, the honour of first place and $500 in prize money going to St Francis Xavier. Terrigal High was awarded second place, St Joseph's Campus third. Last year, St Francis Xavier won both the Hunter and State competitions and hopes to continue its winning streak at the State Rockestedford titles next month.
Between them, he's still going to be in the finish. Red Machine has burst through to tackle his stablemate Manly Star, and they've put paid to the others. Red Machine takes the lead now. He gave those backers a bit of a fright, who took the short odds, but he's racing away to win easily now over Manly Star.
Gary Harley's tipped the winner there, Red Machine. It paid $2 and $1.40. The Quinella $5.10, the Trifecta $54.20.
Believed to be the longest-serving lighthouse keeper in the world, Peter Bailey has spent nearly 40 years at 40 different locations. After maintaining a vigilance for safe shipping, he's been forced to retire due to advances in technology.
Shipping all over the world can just go anywhere in the world with this navigation now and know where they are within feet. And so the old lighthouse has dropped back a little bit and behind the thing.
And sadly, Nora Head will close by 1995. The closing of the lighthouse marks an end of an era. It was first commissioned in 1903, completing navigational aids along the Australian coastline. Mr Bailey has spent the past 4 years at Nora Head and says the closure is disappointing. He migrated from the UK to Australia in 1966 after discovering keepers here were able to live with their families on site. Mr Bailey says while he was challenged by the job overseas, he didn't enjoy the isolation.
I was with one chap over there. He'd been in the job 24 years. Out of that 24 years, he'd only been with his wife and family 4 years.
He's now moving to the North Coast, but not without praise from local tourist operators who say his contribution has been enormous.
It's opened something up that's never ever been opened up for a long while for people to be able to go through, have a look and see what lighthouses really meant to the earlier people in our country.
Jenny Crouch, NBN News.
This is the car that Curry driver Neville Boys believes will help him win the unlimited engine class of the Kempsey Off-Road Championship. Neville, a former national champion, and Sydney partner Bob Mowbray have spent the last 2 years designing and building the Rivmaster car that's worth around $50,000. Neither Neville nor Bob were too keen to reveal the car's total capacity. We do know, however, it has a 4-speed Porsche gearbox, a fuel-injected Pulsar turbo engine, extra-light aluminium wheels, and can reach speeds of up to 200 kilometres an hour. It also has a special air filter to remove dust from the competitor's helmet, because the particles can become a greater problem than the course itself.
It just chokes you can't see. It gets inside your helmet. You try and wipe the inside of your helmet.
The Kempsey race is considered Australia's premier off-road event. It's a 470-kilometre test of endurance. The winning driver is expected to complete the course in 8 hours, but typically more than half the drivers don't finish, many ending up like this. But driving on the edge is how it has to be done.
Sometimes you get in a position where you have a feeling that maybe you've overstepped all realms of possibility. But if you start to worry about those kind of things, no, you're not going to do very well in the events at all.
Neville is no stranger to Kempsey. He won the event in 1988 and this year is out to do it again. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
When Anders Josephson moved from Sweden to Australia with his family 10 years ago, his first purchases were a bed and a case of 1971 Grange Hermitage. Since then, his wine collection has grown. In fact, it's grown into one of the largest private collections in Australia. Nowhere on earth will you find more bottles of Grange Hermitage in a home. Mr. Josephson's complete collection of this celebrated drop in Australian wine history is estimated to be worth more than $1 million. Not that he plans to admire his wine uncorked. The former Swedish racing car champion and fashion has no idea how many bottles he has. After all, he buys it by the pallet load. But he does know Australian wines take pride of place in his vast cellar.
Australian wines are today absolutely world class. Some of the Australian wines here, like we have talked about the Grange, for instance, is one of the 10 top wines.
Yet he does have one criticism. Australians drink their drop when it's too young.
They drink them 1, 2 to 3 years old. They store them on top of their fridges, or even the restaurants have them standing up. The corks dry out, and then people are sort of disappointed that the wines develop wrongly. So I think the Australian may have been a little bit too thirsty, or in fact no one has had the goal to keep wines for a long time.
But Mr. Josephson hopes to change that. He's taking some of his more mature wines out of the cellar and putting them up for auction next month, with his eye on the top end of the hospitality industry.
From its perch on Newcastle's Hill, the grammar school has sent forth generations of young ladies and later gentlemen to make their mark on the world with the benefit of a special brand of education. Today, many past pupils came back to line the pews of the neighbouring cathedral. The school's patron, Bishop Roger Hurft, pointed out the distinctions between an uncaring, privileged elite and those students, past and present, who've gained worthy living skills and compassion from their time at grammar.
We are the badge of religion with pride, for it will provide our nation with a model of education.
In its own way, grammar was revolutionary when established in 1918 to offer young women liberation from their expected path toward domestic duties. It opened with just 40 students, 10 of them boarders. Bessie Hill was one of the first. 2 daughters followed her lead, and Mrs Graham was guest of honour today, meeting a new generation.
Children are gorgeous, the smaller children, and they're also well-mannered and lovely.
There was plenty of catching up to be done, and time to remember those favourite things.
Going to the bogey hole, without a doubt.
Once a week, the boarders were marched over King Edward Park for a swim at the bogey hole, a rare respite from the otherwise stern discipline of the school. Hats and gloves all the time?
Oh yes, then there were hats and gloves all the time. I'm still wearing a hat and gloves, which is amazing, but that's probably the training of the grammar school.
Barbara is one of what's believed to be thousands of women unaware they're at risk of contracting AIDS. Married for 25 years, the shock of finding out her husband was bisexual left the family devastated.
He said that all our married life he'd never had long-term relationships, just a couple, that mostly he was having sex with, indiscriminately with men all the time.
Barbara's been tested for AIDS. The results so far have been negative.
But unfortunately, I did pick up another problem from that area that I have to live with for the rest of my life because of the unprotected sex.
According to Marilyn Bliss from the Hunters Public Health Unit, the issue is yet to be widely accepted as a serious health risk.
I think that it's probably more hidden in rural areas, and I have real concerns about that in terms of women not having the opportunity to talk about it.
From Monday, women partners of bisexual men can phone the AIDS Council's special 008 number. Callers can remain anonymous.
Even if they aren't sure, if they even suspect that their partner is having sex with another man, they can ring in and talk to the women who've been trained and have been through similar circumstances and talk about what's happening with them.
When you're not sure what's going on like this, you feel like you're going crazy, that there's something wrong with you, and it's not. It's things that are happening that you can't understand.
In New South Wales alone, more than 80,000 children have been adopted since the early 20s. Unless both mother and child wanted to find each other, it's been virtually impossible to get any identifying details. 2 years ago, the Adoption Information Act was introduced, allowing access to birth certificates.
That would then act as a passport to obtaining information from other adoption records, hospitals, the Department of Community Services. And it would also enable them to search for and find that person if they wanted to make an approach.
Joanne Cowell from the Sydney-based Post-Adoption Resource Centre is taking the service into regional areas. For Beth and her newfound daughter Melanie, their recent reunion has changed their lives.
There was nothing to stand in my way anymore. I've always felt that you couldn't do anything. You were always barred, especially the relinquishing mother.
Bigger family, new life, and loving it.
But not everyone wants to make contact. To protect privacy, the Act allows for a contact veto from either party. At 49, Joan Jerd has just found out she was adopted and is now in search of her younger sister.
It'll give us both something, I hope. I could have nieces and nephews that I don't know about. And I hope she'll get a lot out of it as much as I will.
Anyone wanting advice can contact the service or local Adoption Triangle group. Melinda Smith, NBN News.